Rain battered the weathered roof of the abandoned barn like an angry spirit seeking entrance, each drop a cold reminder of Rebecca Hawthorne's desperate plight. Her trembling fingers pulled the threadbare blanket tighter around her infant daughter's tiny body as another violent shiver racked her frame. The harsh winter of 1875 showed no mercy to a widowed mother with nowhere to go in the unforgiving territory of Wyoming. "Hush now, Emily," Rebecca whispered, her breath visible in the frigid air as she tried to soothe her whimpering 3-month-old. The baby's cries grew more insistent, echoing in the cavernous space of the dilapidated structure. "I know you're hungry. I know, my love." Rebecca's stomach clenched with hunger and fear. It had been 2 days since she'd had a proper meal, saving what little food remained for nursing her child. After fleeing her brother-in-law's unwanted advances following her husband's death, she had traveled as far as her meager savings would take her before being forced to continue on foot. The wound on her leg throbbed mercilessly, a deep gash from falling on rocky terrain the previous day. The makeshift bandage she'd torn from the hem of her dress was now stained a worrying shade of crimson. Outside, the storm intensified. Wind howled through the gaps in the wooden slats, bringing with it biting cold and swirling snow. Rebecca's teeth chattered uncontrollably as she curled her body protectively around Emily. "We'll find someplace safe tomorrow," she promised, though doubt gnawed at her heart. Her eyelids grew heavy as exhaustion threatened to overcome her. She fought against it, terrified that if she succumbed to sleep in this cold, she might never wake. The sudden sound of approaching hoofbeats cut through the storm's fury. Rebecca tensed, clutching Emily closer to her chest. Her heart hammered wildly as the barn door creaked open, sending a blast of freezing air sweeping across the floor. A tall figure filled the doorway, silhouetted against the gray winter twilight. Rebecca shrank back into the shadows, praying that Emily would remain quiet, that they would go unnoticed. The stranger stepped inside, leading a magnificent chestnut stallion behind him. The man stomped snow from his boots and shook it from his wide-brimmed hat before securing the door against the storm. "Hello." His deep voice carried across the barn. "Is someone in here?" Rebecca remained silent, but Emily chose that moment to let out a piercing wail. The man's head turned sharply toward the sound. "I mean no harm," he called out, slowly approaching the corner where Rebecca huddled. "I'm just seeking shelter from the storm." As he drew closer, Rebecca could make out his features. Tall and broad-shouldered, with a strong jaw shadowed with several days' growth of beard. His eyes, startlingly blue even in the dim light, reflected concern rather than threat. "Please," Rebecca whispered, her voice hoarse. "We'll leave at first light." The man crouched down several feet away, respecting her obvious fear. "Madam, I'm not going to hurt you or your little one. Name's Gabriel Ross. I own a ranch about 5 miles east of here." Rebecca's suspicion didn't waver. "We're just passing through." Gabriel's gaze traveled to her injured leg, where blood had seeped through the crude bandage. "You're hurt." His voice softened. "And that baby sounds mighty hungry." Emily's cries grew more insistent. Rebecca tried to quiet her, but her own strength was fading fast. "Madam, you're in no condition to be traveling, especially not in this weather. My ranch isn't far. There's food, warmth, and I've got a housekeeper who can help tend to that leg." Rebecca hesitated, weighing her options. The stranger seemed genuine, but she had learned the hard way how quickly men's kindness could turn to something else. Gabriel reached slowly into his saddlebag and pulled out a small flask and some jerky wrapped in cloth. "At least take this." The flask is just water, and the meat's smoked venison. The sight of food weakened Rebecca's resolve. Her hands shook as she accepted his offering, taking a cautious sip of water before trying the jerky. "Thank you," she murmured. Gabriel nodded, then stood and moved away to tend to his horse. He removed the saddle and brushed down the animal, all while keeping a respectful distance. Rebecca watched him warily as she chewed the tough, salty meat. Emily had quieted somewhat, soothed by her mother's slightly calmer demeanor. After caring for his horse, Gabriel gathered some straw into a pile and laid his bedroll atop it. From his saddlebags, he produced a tin of matches and some kindling. Soon, a small fire burned in the center of the barn where a stone floor made it safe. "The fire's small enough not to be dangerous, but it'll provide some warmth," he explained. "You're welcome to move closer." The promise of heat was too tempting to resist. Rebecca cautiously shifted toward the fire, wincing as pain shot through her injured leg. Gabriel noticed her distress. "May I?" he asked, gesturing toward her wound. After a moment's hesitation, Rebecca nodded. The cowboy approached slowly and knelt beside her, gently examining the gash through the torn fabric. "This needs cleaning and proper dressing," he said gravely. "Infection's a real possibility if it's not tended to." "I'll manage," Rebecca insisted, though she knew he was right. Gabriel met her eyes. "Madam, I understand your caution, but that little one needs you healthy. My offer stands shelter at my ranch, no strings attached. My housekeeper, Mrs. Tildy, she's got away with wounds and birthing alike. She'd be mighty disappointed in me if I left a mother and child out here in this storm." Rebecca studied his face, searching for any sign of deceit. Finding none, she glanced down at Emily, whose tiny features were pinched with discomfort. "What's your name, madam?" Gabriel asked gently. "Rebecca," she replied after a moment. "Rebecca Hawthorne. And this is Emily." Gabriel smiled, the expression warming his weathered features. "Pleased to meet you both, though I wish it were under better circumstances." The fire crackled between them as Rebecca contemplated her options. The storm showed no signs of abating, and her condition was deteriorating. For Emily's sake, she needed to swallow her pride and accept help. "If your offer still stands, Mr. Ross," she said finally, "we would be grateful for shelter tonight." Relief crossed Gabriel's face. "It does indeed. And please, call me Gabriel." He stood and began gathering his things. "We should leave soon, before the storm worsens." As Rebecca attempted to stand, pain shot through her leg, and she stumbled. Gabriel was at her side instantly, strong arms steadying her. "Easy now," he murmured. Before she could protest, he had gathered both her and Emily into his arms, cradling them against his broad chest. The sudden warmth of his body was startling after so many hours of bone-deep cold. "I can walk," Rebecca objected weakly, though in truth, she doubted she could. "No need to make that leg worse," Gabriel replied. He carried them to his horse and, with surprising gentleness, helped Rebecca into the saddle, making sure Emily was secure in her arms. Gabriel took the reins and led the horse on foot, shielding them from the worst of the wind with his own body. Rebecca clutched Emily close, overwhelmed by the stranger's kindness. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to feel a glimmer of hope. The journey to Gabriel's ranch seemed endless through the swirling snow, but true to his word, within an hour they arrived at a sturdy two-story farmhouse. Warm light spilled from the windows, and smoke curled invitingly from the chimney. As they approached, the front door swung open, revealing a stout older woman with silver hair pulled into a tight bun. "Gabriel Ross, what in heaven's name kept you so long?" she called out, her expression shifting from annoyance to surprise as she spotted Rebecca and the baby. "Good Lord above, Mrs. Tildy," Gabriel called back over the wind. "We've got guests in need of care. This is Rebecca Hawthorne and her daughter Emily." The housekeeper didn't hesitate. "Bring them in this instant. That poor child must be half frozen." Gabriel helped Rebecca dismount, then once again gathered her and Emily into his arms, carrying them up the porch steps and into the blessed warmth of the house. The transition from bitter cold to heat made Rebecca's skin tingle painfully. "Take them to the guest room," Mrs. Tildy directed, already bustling toward the kitchen. "I'll heat some broth and prepare hot water for a bath." Gabriel carried Rebecca through a cozy sitting room and down a short hallway to a bedroom at the back of the house. A four-poster bed with a colorful quilt dominated the space, and a small fire already burned in the hearth. Gently, he set Rebecca on the edge of the bed. "Mrs. Tildy will help you get cleaned up. She's the best healer in these parts." "Thank you," Rebecca whispered, suddenly overwhelmed by his kindness and her own exhaustion. Gabriel nodded, his expression soft. "You rest now. You're safe here." As he left the room, Mrs. Tildy entered carrying a tray with a steaming bowl of broth and a cup of tea. Her keen eyes took in Rebecca's disheveled appearance and the baby's fretful state. "That man," she muttered, setting down the tray, "always bringing home strays. Though I must say, this is the first time he's brought home people instead of injured wildlife." Her tone was gruff, but her eyes were kind. "Now, let's see to that leg while you have some broth. Then we'll get you both bathed and properly fed." The next hour passed in a blur for Rebecca. Mrs. Tildy cleaned and bandaged her leg with practiced efficiency, declaring that while it was a nasty wound, it would heal well with proper care. She helped Rebecca bathe, provided clean clothing, and showed her how to use the breast pump she kept from when her daughter had visited with her grandchildren. "The baby needs you strong," Mrs. Tildy insisted as she encouraged Rebecca to eat a hearty meal of venison stew and freshly baked bread. "Can't feed her properly if you're starving yourself." By the time the elderly housekeeper left them alone, Emily was fed, changed, and sleeping peacefully in a makeshift cradle fashioned from a dresser drawer lined with soft blankets. Rebecca, clean and warm for the first time in weeks, sat propped against pillows on the comfortable bed, fighting to keep her eyes open. A soft knock at the door roused her from near slumber. Gabriel entered, carrying a mug of something steaming. "Mrs. Tildy's special tea," he explained, setting it on the bedside table. "She says it'll help with the pain and help you sleep." "Your housekeeper is a formidable woman," Rebecca said with a small smile. Gabriel chuckled. "That she is. Been with my family since I was a boy. Don't know what I'd do without her." Rebecca studied him in the warm firelight. Without the obscuring shadows of the barn, she could see he was younger than she'd initially thought, perhaps early 30s, with laugh lines at the corners of his eyes and a few strands of silver at his temples that spoke of experience rather than age. "I don't know how to thank you," she said softly. Gabriel shook his head. "No need for thanks. Anyone would have done the same." "No," Rebecca contradicted gently. "Not anyone." A moment of understanding passed between them. Gabriel cleared his throat, suddenly awkward. "Well, I should let you rest. If you need anything in the night, just call out. My room is across the hall, and Mrs. Tildy's is at the end." "Mr. Ross." Gabriel, Rebecca amended. "How long can we stay?" He met her gaze steadily. "As long as you need. Winter's just setting in, and that leg needs time to heal. Come spring, if you're determined to move on, I'll help you get wherever you're heading." Relief washed over Rebecca, bringing unexpected tears to her eyes. She blinked them back hastily. "Thank you." Gabriel nodded, then quietly left the room, closing the door behind him. Rebecca sipped the tea, which tasted of mint and honey with something earthy beneath. As warmth spread through her body, she gazed at her sleeping daughter. For the first time since Thomas's death 8 months ago, she felt something like peace. Tomorrow would bring questions and decisions, but tonight they were safe, warm, and fed. It was more than she had dared hope for just hours ago. As sleep claimed her, Rebecca's last conscious thought was of Gabriel's strong arms around her and Emily, and the surprising feeling of rightness she had felt there. The following days established a routine that brought much-needed stability to Rebecca's life. Mrs. Tildy changed the dressing on her leg each morning, noting with satisfaction that the wound was healing cleanly. The older woman had taken to Emily immediately, often insisting on caring for the baby while Rebecca rested. Gabriel was a constant, reassuring presence, though he kept a respectful distance. Rebecca learned that he ran the ranch with the help of 3 cowhands who lived in a bunkhouse near the barn. The men, Juan, Elijah, and Peter, tipped their hats politely when introduced to Rebecca, but otherwise gave her space, sensing her wariness around strangers. A week after their arrival, Rebecca sat at the kitchen table, Emily sleeping in her arms, watching Mrs. Tildy knead bread dough with practiced hands. "I need to contribute somehow," Rebecca said suddenly. "I can't accept your generosity indefinitely without earning my keep." Mrs. Tildy glanced up, flour dusting her forearms. "Nonsense. You're still healing." "My hands work fine," Rebecca insisted. "I can cook, clean, mend whatever needs doing." The housekeeper regarded her thoughtfully, then nodded. "Very well. I could use help with the mending. Gabriel and those boys tear through more shirts than you'd believe possible." Rebecca smiled, relieved. "I'd be happy to help with that. And perhaps," Mrs. Tildy added casually, "you might consider taking over some of the cooking once you're more mobile. These old bones would appreciate the rest." Though Rebecca suspected the woman was merely creating tasks to satisfy her pride, she agreed eagerly. The thought of being useful again lifted her spirits immeasurably. That evening, Gabriel returned from checking fence lines to find Rebecca in the sitting room, a pile of shirts beside her as she deftly repaired a torn sleeve. Emily slept in her makeshift cradle nearby. "You don't have to do that," he said, removing his hat and hanging it on a peg by the door. Rebecca looked up, needle paused mid-stitch. I want to. Mrs. Tildy has enough to do without mending your entire wardrobe. Gabriel smiled, the expression transforming his serious face. He crossed the room and sat in the armchair opposite her. How's the leg today? Much better. Mrs. Tildy says I might try walking a bit tomorrow. That's good news. He hesitated, then asked, May I ask where you were headed? Before the storm, I mean. Rebecca's hand stilled. She had known this question would come eventually. I don't really know, she admitted. Just away. Gabriel waited patiently, sensing there was more to the story. Rebecca sighed. My husband, Thomas, died last spring pneumonia. We had a small farm near Cheyenne. His brother Silas inherited it, as Thomas had no will. He made it clear what role he expected me to fill. Understanding darkened Gabriel's expression. So you ran? Yes, with what little money I had saved. Emily was only a few weeks old. Rebecca swallowed hard. I thought I could reach Denver, find work there. But the money ran out sooner than I expected. Gabriel was quiet for a long moment. You're welcome to stay here as long as you need. No expectations beyond what you choose to give. The sincerity in his voice brought unexpected tears to Rebecca's eyes. She blinked them away, focusing on her stitching. Thank you. Gabriel cleared his throat. I should warn you, though we'll be slaughtering a steer tomorrow. Might be noisy. Rebecca smiled. I grew up on a farm, Mr. Ross. A little butchering won't trouble me. He chuckled. I'm beginning to think there's very little that would trouble you, Mrs. Hawthorne. Their eyes met, and for a moment, something warm and unexpected passed between them. Rebecca was the first to look away, suddenly conscious of the impropriety of their situation, a widow and a bachelor under the same roof. Mrs. Tildy said to tell you supper will be ready soon, she said, changing the subject. Gabriel nodded and rose. I'll just wash up then. As he left the room, Rebecca found her gaze following him. In just a week, Gabriel Ross had upended everything she thought she knew about men. His kindness came with no ulterior motives, his strength was tempered with gentleness, and his generosity seemed boundless. It was dangerous, she knew, to allow herself to feel anything for him. Once her leg healed, she would need to move on, find a place where she and Emily could build a new life. Becoming attached would only make that departure more painful. Yet as the days passed, Rebecca found herself increasingly drawn to the quiet rancher. She observed how he spoke to his men with respect, never raising his voice even when things went wrong. She watched him with the animals, gentle but firm, always patient. And most tellingly, she saw how he looked at Emily, with a tenderness that made her heart ache. By mid-December, Rebecca's leg had healed enough that she could walk without pain, though Mrs. Tildy still insisted she avoid strenuous activity. The ranch had settled into its winter routine, mending equipment, caring for the livestock, and preparing for the spring calving season. One evening, as a fierce blizzard howled outside, the household gathered in the sitting room. Mrs. Tildy knitted by the fire, Gabriel read from a dog-eared copy of Ivanhoe, and Rebecca rocked Emily, who was fighting sleep despite her heavy eyelids. Here, Gabriel said suddenly, setting down his book. Let me try. Before Rebecca could object, he had crossed to her side and held out his arms. Hesitantly, she passed Emily to him, watching as he cradled the baby with surprising expertise. My sister has 4 little ones, he explained, noticing Rebecca's expression. I've had some practice. He began to pace slowly around the room, humming a tune Rebecca didn't recognize. Emily's eyes grew heavier until finally, they closed completely, her tiny body relaxing in surrender to sleep. Mrs. Tildy exchanged a meaningful glance with Rebecca, then announced, These old bones need rest. Good night to you both. She gathered her knitting and left the room with a knowing smile that made Rebecca blush. Gabriel continued to hold Emily, seemingly content to let the baby sleep in his arms. She's getting bigger, he observed softly. Stronger too. Yes, Rebecca agreed. Thanks to you and Mrs. Tildy. Gabriel shook his head. Thanks to her mother's determination. He looked up, his blue eyes intense in the firelight. You're remarkable, Rebecca. Most women would have broken under what you've endured. The use of her given name sent a small thrill through her. I had no choice. Emily needed me to be strong. There's always a choice, Gabriel countered gently. Many would have stayed with the brother-in-law. accepted a roof over their heads at any cost. You chose a harder path for the right reasons. Rebecca felt tears threatening and blinked rapidly. I should put her down, she said, rising to take Emily from his arms. As she reached for her daughter, her fingers brushed against Gabriel's chest. The contact, though brief, sent a jolt of awareness through her body. Gabriel's breath caught, and for a moment, they stood frozen, eyes locked, the sleeping baby between them. Rebecca stepped back first, carefully taking Emily. "Good night, Gabriel," she whispered, then fled to her room, her heart pounding with emotions she wasn't ready to examine. The next morning, Rebecca avoided being alone with Gabriel, making excuses to help Mrs. Tildy with chores whenever he entered a room. If the housekeeper noticed this sudden skittishness, she made no comment. The blizzard continued for 3 days, keeping everyone housebound. On the 4th morning, the storm finally broke, revealing a world transformed into a glistening white expanse. The sun shone brilliantly off the snow, creating a dazzling landscape of diamond-like sparkles. Rebecca stood at the kitchen window, Emily in her arms, marveling at the beauty. "Look, sweetheart," she whispered. "Isn't it magnificent? First big snow of the season is always something special." Gabriel's voice came from behind her. Rebecca turned, composing her features into a neutral expression. "Good morning. I didn't hear you come in." Gabriel studied her face, a slight furrow between his brows. "Have I offended you somehow, Rebecca?" "No, of course not," she replied too quickly. "Then why are you avoiding me?" Rebecca sighed, bouncing Emily gently as the baby began to fuss. "I'm not avoiding you. I'm just being careful." Understanding dawned in Gabriel's eyes. "You think I expect something in return for helping you, don't you?" The words escaped before she could stop them. Gabriel's expression hardened. "Is that the kind of man you think I am?" Rebecca felt ashamed at the hurt in his voice. "No, I don't. But experience has taught me to be cautious." His face softened. "I understand caution, Rebecca, but there's a difference between caution and shutting yourself off from every possibility of friendship." The pause before the word friendship hung between them, laden with unspoken meaning. "I need to feed Emily," Rebecca said, unable to continue the conversation. Gabriel nodded, stepping aside to let her pass. As she reached the doorway, he spoke again. "I'm riding out to check the herd today. Would you and Emily like to come? The sleigh could use a trial run before Christmas." The invitation surprised her. "In the snow? The sleigh handles well and fresh powder. Mrs. Tildy can pack us a lunch." He smiled tentatively. "Might do you good to get out of the house for a while." Rebecca hesitated, then found herself nodding. "Yes, I'd like that. If Mrs. Tildy doesn't mind watching Emily." "Are you joking?" Mrs. Tildy's voice came from the pantry. "A whole afternoon with that sweet child all to myself? Go, both of you. Get some fresh air." Gabriel's smile broadened. "It's settled then. We'll leave after breakfast." 2 hours later, Rebecca found herself bundled in warm furs, seated beside Gabriel in a handsome sleigh drawn by 2 sturdy horses. The runners cut smoothly through the pristine snow, creating a rhythmic swishing sound that blended with the jingling of the harness bells. "This is wonderful," Rebecca breathed, her breath forming clouds in the crisp air. Gabriel glanced at her, pleasure evident in his expression. "Wait until you see the north pasture. With the mountains as a backdrop, it's a sight to behold." They rode in comfortable silence for a time, the vast white landscape stretching around them. Rebecca felt a peace she hadn't experienced in years, a sense of rightness that both comforted and frightened her. "Tell me about your husband," Gabriel said suddenly. Rebecca looked at him in surprise. "Thomas." Gabriel nodded, his eyes on the path ahead. "If you don't mind talking about him." Rebecca was quiet for a moment, gathering her thoughts. "He was a good man. Kind, hard-working. We were childhood sweethearts, married young." She smiled sadly. "He would have been a wonderful father." "You loved him very much," Gabriel observed. "Yes," Rebecca agreed. "Though our marriage wasn't. It wasn't what I'd imagined as a girl." She hesitated, then continued. "Thomas was more like a dear friend than a passionate love. We were comfortable together." Gabriel considered this. "There are worse foundations for a marriage than friendship." "Yes," Rebecca agreed. "But sometimes I wonder if there should be more." She flushed, embarrassed by her candor. "I'm sorry, that was inappropriate." "No," Gabriel said softly. It wasn't. He turned to look at her directly. I think there should be more too. The intensity in his blue eyes made Rebecca's heart race. She looked away, overwhelmed by the emotions his gaze stirred. They crested a small hill, and the view opened up before them a vast, snow-covered meadow bordered by towering pine trees, with the majestic Rocky Mountains rising purple and white against the clear blue sky. Oh, Rebecca breathed, the beauty momentarily banishing her discomfort. It's like something from a dream. Gabriel smiled, pleased by her reaction. My grandfather chose this land because of this view. Said a man could look at those mountains every day of his life and never grow tired of them. Your grandfather was a wise man, Rebecca said. He was. Gabriel guided the horses toward a small copse of trees. That's where we're headed. The cattle shelter there during storms. As they approached, Rebecca could see dark shapes moving among the trees, the herd seeking protection from the winter elements. Gabriel brought the sleigh to a halt at a respectful distance. I need to check that they have enough feed, he explained, securing the reins. Won't take long. Rebecca nodded, content to remain in the sleigh and watch as Gabriel waded through the snow toward the cattle. She observed how the animals responded to his presence, alert, but not fearful, some even approaching him with what appeared to be recognition. The peaceful scene was shattered by a sudden commotion from within the herd. A young steer bolted, startled by something unseen, careening directly toward Gabriel. Before Rebecca could call out a warning, Gabriel was knocked to the ground, disappearing beneath the panicked animal in the snow. Gabriel! Rebecca screamed, scrambling from the sleigh. She plunged into the knee-deep snow, struggling toward where she had last seen him. The steer had continued its frantic run, leaving Gabriel lying motionless in the trampled snow. Rebecca's heart pounded with fear as she reached his side and fell to her knees beside him. Gabriel? Can you hear me? She called, gently touching his face. To her immense relief, his eyes fluttered open. Rebecca, he mumbled, clearly dazed. Don't move, she instructed, running her hands carefully over his limbs, checking for injuries. Are you hurt? Gabriel grimaced, attempting to sit up. Just had the wind knocked out of me. And maybe a bruised rib or two. Rebecca helped him to a sitting position, noting how he winced when he tried to take a deep breath. We need to get you back to the ranch. I'm fine, he insisted, but his pale face belied his words. You are not fine, Rebecca countered firmly. Can you stand? With her assistance, Gabriel managed to get to his feet, leaning heavily on her shoulder. Together, they made their slow way back to the sleigh, where Rebecca helped him onto the seat before taking the reins herself. You know how to drive a sleigh? Gabriel asked, eyebrows raised despite his obvious discomfort. I told you I grew up on a farm, Rebecca reminded him, expertly turning the horses back toward the ranch. My father taught me to drive a wagon before I was 12. A sleigh isn't so different. Gabriel chuckled, then winced at the pain the movement caused. I keep underestimating you, Mrs. Hawthorne. Most men do, Rebecca replied with a small smile, urging the horses to a brisk pace. By the time they reached the ranch, Gabriel's face had taken on a grayish tinge, and his breathing was shallow. Mrs. Tildy met them at the door, Emily in her arms, her expression changing from welcome to alarm as she took in Gabriel's condition. What happened? She demanded as two of the ranch hands appeared to help Gabriel from the sleigh. A steer knocked him down, Rebecca explained, following as the men helped Gabriel into the house. I think he may have broken ribs. Mrs. Tildy handed Emily to Rebecca and took charge immediately, directing the men to take Gabriel to his bedroom. Peter, ride for Doc Simmons, she ordered. Tell him it's urgent. The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Rebecca cared for Emily while Mrs. Tildy tended to Gabriel, applying cold compresses to reduce swelling and brewing willow bark tea for the pain. The doctor arrived just before dusk, his weathered face grave as he examined the injured rancher. 2 broken ribs and some nasty bruising, he announced finally. He's lucky the steer didn't trample him properly, or we'd be digging a grave instead of wrapping his chest. Rebecca, who had been waiting anxiously outside Gabriel's room with Emily, felt weak with relief at the prognosis. He'll need rest, the doctor continued, packing his bag. No riding, no heavy lifting for at least 6 weeks. And keep him calm, getting riled up won't help those ribs heal. I'll see to it, Mrs. Tildy assured him. After the doctor left, Rebecca hesitated outside Gabriel's door, uncertain if her presence would be welcome. Mrs. Tildy emerged, spotted her, and smiled knowingly. "He's asking for you," the housekeeper said. "I'll take the little one for a while." Rebecca surrendered Emily to Mrs. Tildy's capable hands and entered Gabriel's room with some trepidation. He lay propped against pillows, his chest wrapped in tight bandages, his face drawn with pain despite the medicine the doctor had administered. "You saved me again," he said when he saw her, attempting a smile. Rebecca moved to the chair beside his bed. "I hardly think helping you to the sleigh compares with rescuing Emily and me from certain death." "Depends on your perspective," Gabriel replied. "If you hadn't been there, I might have frozen before I could drag myself back." Rebecca shook her head at his exaggeration, but was secretly pleased by his gratitude. "How do you feel?" "Like I've been kicked by a steer," he quipped, then grew serious. "Rebecca, there's something I need to say." The intensity in his voice made her nervous. "You should rest." "No, please." He reached for her hand, his large, calloused fingers engulfing her smaller ones. "I've been wanting to tell you. You and Emily, you've brought something to this house that's been missing for a long time." Rebecca's heart began to pound. "Gabriel, let me finish," he insisted gently. "I know you plan to leave come spring. You have every right to build a new life wherever you choose. But I want you to know that there's a place for you here for both of you if you want it." "What are you saying?" Rebecca whispered, though she knew. Gabriel met her gaze steadily. "I'm saying that I've grown to care for you, Rebecca, more than I thought possible in such a short time. And I care for Emily as if she were my own." Rebecca felt tears welling in her eyes. "Gabriel, you don't need to answer now," he assured her quickly. "I know it's too soon after your husband. I know you may not feel the same. But I needed you to know, before you make plans to leave, that there's another option." A tear escaped, trailing down Rebecca's cheek. "I don't know what to say." Gabriel squeezed her hand. "Say you'll think about it. That's all I ask." Rebecca nodded, unable to form words around the emotion clogging her throat. She leaned forward impulsively and pressed a gentle kiss to his forehead. "Rest now," she whispered, rising to leave. At the door, she paused and looked back. Gabriel was watching her, his expression a mixture of hope and uncertainty that matched her own confused feelings. That night, Rebecca lay awake long after Emily had fallen asleep, her thoughts in turmoil. Gabriel's words had unlocked emotions she had carefully contained since Thomas's death: longing, hope, the desire for a partner who would be more than just a provider. But fear tempered these feelings. What if Gabriel changed once she accepted his offer? What if the kind, gentle man revealed another side once she was committed? And even if he remained exactly as he appeared, could she open her heart again, risk the devastating loss she had experienced with Thomas? Yet as she finally drifted toward sleep, one thought persisted. The memory of Gabriel holding Emily, the tenderness in his eyes as he gazed at the baby who wasn't his by blood, but whom he already seemed to love as his own. The weeks that followed Gabriel's injury established a new routine in the household. Rebecca took on more responsibilities as both Gabriel and Mrs. Tildy were forced to admit that the rancher needed more recovery time than he'd initially acknowledged. Rebecca learned to manage the household accounts, to coordinate with the ranch hands about daily tasks, and even to assist with minor veterinary procedures when necessary. Gabriel, restricted to the house and light duties, became her reluctant tutor, impressed by her quick mind and practical approach to problems. Their relationship evolved as well, growing deeper as they spent hours in conversation. Gabriel told her of his childhood on the ranch, of losing his parents to influenza when he was 20, of his dreams for expanding the property and breeding a hardier strain of cattle. Rebecca shared stories of her own youth, her love of books, her hope that Emily would have opportunities she herself had never been offered. Through it all, Gabriel's declaration hung between them, acknowledged but not revisited. Rebecca knew he was giving her space to consider his words, to come to her own decision without pressure. Christmas approached, bringing with it a festive atmosphere despite Gabriel's injury. Mrs. Tildy outdid herself with baking and decorating, filling the house with the scents of cinnamon, pine, and wood smoke. The ranch hands contributed a magnificent fir tree, which they set up in the sitting room and decorated with paper chains, dried berries, and candles. On Christmas Eve, After a hearty dinner and an evening of carols around the fire, Rebecca put Emily to bed and returned to the sitting room to find Gabriel alone, gazing at the tree. His ribs were healing well, allowing him more mobility, though he still moved with careful deliberation. "Mrs. Tildy has gone to bed," he explained as Rebecca hesitated in the doorway. Said the excitement wore her out. Rebecca smiled, crossing to sit in the armchair opposite his. The tree candles cast a warm, flickering light across the room, creating an atmosphere of intimacy. "I have something for you," Gabriel said after a moment, reaching beside his chair to produce a small package wrapped in brown paper and tied with a red ribbon. "For Christmas." Rebecca flushed. "I don't have anything for you. You've given me plenty," Gabriel interrupted gently. "Running this place while I've been laid up is gift enough." Reluctantly, Rebecca accepted the package. She untied the ribbon carefully and folded back the paper to reveal a small wooden box with intricate carving on the lid of mother and child, the details exquisitely rendered. "Gabriel," she breathed, running her fingers over the carving. "It's beautiful." "Open it," he urged. Inside, nestled on a bed of soft cloth, lay a delicate silver locket on a fine chain. Rebecca lifted it with trembling fingers and pressed the tiny clasp. The locket sprang open to reveal a miniature portrait of Emily on one side, the other side empty. "How did you?" Rebecca began, bewildered. "Mrs. Tildy's son is a photographer in Denver," Gabriel explained. "I sent him a description of Emily, and he created this. The other side is for whoever you choose to put there." Tears filled Rebecca's eyes. "This is too much, Gabriel." "No," he said softly. "It's not nearly enough for what you've come to mean to me." Rebecca closed the locket and clutched it to her chest, overwhelmed by emotion. "I don't deserve such kindness." "You deserve far more," Gabriel replied, his voice husky. He leaned forward, wincing slightly at the movement, and took her free hand in his. "Rebecca, I know I said you didn't need to answer, but Christmas seems a time for honesty. Have you thought about what I said? About staying?" Rebecca met his gaze, seeing the vulnerability there, the hope he couldn't quite conceal. "I've thought of little else," she admitted. "And," he prompted gently. "I'm afraid," she whispered. Gabriel's grip on her hand tightened. Of what? Of trusting again. Of believing this could be real. She swallowed hard. "Of how much it would hurt to lose you, if I let myself love you." Gabriel's breath caught at her words. "Rebecca," he said, her name a prayer on his lips. "I can't promise nothing bad will ever happen. Life doesn't offer those guarantees. But I can promise that as long as I draw breath, I will cherish you and Emily, protect you both with everything I have, and strive every day to be worthy of your trust." Rebecca looked into his earnest blue eyes and felt the last of her resistance crumble. "I think," she said slowly, "that I would like very much to stay." Joy transformed Gabriel's face. He rose carefully from his chair and knelt before her, still holding her hand. "Rebecca Hawthorne, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Of allowing me to be a father to Emily, and perhaps, God willing, to other children we might have together?" Rebecca's tears spilled over, but she was smiling through them. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Gabriel Ross, I will marry you." Gabriel's answering smile was radiant. He rose and gently pulled her to her feet, drawing her into a careful embrace mindful of his healing ribs. Then, with infinite tenderness, he lowered his lips to hers in their first kiss, a sweet, gentle meeting that held the promise of deeper passion to come. When they parted, Gabriel rested his forehead against hers. "Merry Christmas, Rebecca," he murmured. "Merry Christmas, Gabriel," she replied, her heart fuller than she had believed possible just months before. The winter night enfolded the ranch house in darkness, but inside, the warm glow of the Christmas candles illuminated two people who had found, against all odds, a second chance at love. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and silent, covering the land in a blanket of pristine white, a clean slate, a new beginning. The ranch burst into activity as spring arrived, bringing with it calving season and preparations for the summer cattle drive. Gabriel's ribs had healed completely, allowing him to resume his full duties, though Rebecca noticed he was more cautious around the cattle than he had been before. Their wedding was set for early June, after the most intensive spring work was completed. Mrs. Tildy threw herself into preparations with enthusiasm, ordering fabric from Denver for Rebecca's dress, and planning a feast that would be talked about for years to come. Rebecca found herself busier than she had ever been, dividing her time between caring for Emily, who was now an active 8-month-old determined to crawl into every corner of the house, learning the intricacies of running the ranch alongside Gabriel, and preparing for her new role as his wife. In the rare quiet moments, usually late in the evening when Emily was asleep and the day's work done, Rebecca and Gabriel would sit together on the porch swing, planning their future. Gabriel spoke of expanding the herd, building a larger house, perhaps adding orchards to diversify the ranch's income. Rebecca shared her hope of starting a small school for the children of neighboring ranches, including their own. These peaceful interludes were precious to Rebecca, who still sometimes marveled at the turn her life had taken. From the desperate young widow shivering on a barn floor with her infant daughter, she had transformed into a confident woman with a home, a purpose, and a man who loved her with a depth that continually surprised and humbled her. May brought warm days and cool nights. The landscape transformed from winter's stark beauty to a riot of wildflowers and new growth. The wedding was just 2 weeks away when Juan, one of the ranch hands, galloped into the yard one afternoon, his horse lathered and his expression grim. "Riders coming," he reported to Gabriel, who was mending a saddle on the porch. 6 men, heavily armed. "They're asking about a woman and baby at every ranch in the valley." Gabriel's expression hardened. "Did they give a name?" Juan nodded. "Looking for a Rebecca Hawthorne and her daughter. Said she's a thief who stole family property." Rebecca, who had emerged from the house in time to hear this, felt the blood drain from her face. "Silas," she whispered. Gabriel was at her side instantly, his arm around her waist supporting her as her knees threatened to buckle. "Your brother-in-law?" She nodded, terror making her voice tremble. "He must have tracked us here." Gabriel's jaw tightened. "Juan, how far out are they?" "About an hour, boss. I rode ahead when I heard them asking at the Mitchell place." Gabriel made a swift decision. "Get Elijah and Peter. Tell them to be ready, but no one makes a move without my say-so." As Juan hurried to obey, Gabriel turned to Rebecca. "Go inside. Get Emily. Pack only what you absolutely need." "What are you going to do?" Rebecca asked, clutching his arm. "Get you and Emily somewhere safe, then deal with Silas Hawthorne." Gabriel's voice was calm, but Rebecca could see the fury simmering beneath his controlled exterior. "He's dangerous, Gabriel," she warned. "He won't leave without what he believes is his." Gabriel's eyes hardened. "You and Emily are not his. You never were. Now go, quickly." Rebecca hurried inside, her mind racing as she gathered Emily from where she was playing under Mrs. Tildy's watchful eye. The housekeeper took one look at Rebecca's face and demanded, "What's happened?" "Silas has found us," Rebecca explained tersely, heading for her room with Emily in her arms. "Gabriel says to pack only what we need." Mrs. Tildy followed, her expression grim. "That man means to hide you, then." "I think so," Rebecca confirmed, grabbing a carpet bag and stuffing it with diapers, a change of clothes for Emily, and her own nightgown. The silver locket Gabriel had given her for Christmas hung around her neck. She tucked it inside her dress for safekeeping. Mrs. Tildy bustled about, adding a few practical items to the bag. "The old line shack in the North Meadow," she said decisively. "It's well stocked. Hard to find if you don't know it's there. Gabriel will take you there." Rebecca nodded, grateful for the housekeeper's practical mind. She slung the bag over her shoulder and headed back downstairs, Emily clutched tightly to her chest. Gabriel met her in the kitchen, his rifle in hand, a determined set to his jaw. "Mrs. Tildy, if these men come here, you've never heard of Rebecca Hawthorne. Understand?" The older woman nodded grimly. "Never seen hide nor hair of any such person." Gabriel turned to Rebecca. "I've saddled Daisy for you. She's gentle but swift. Follow the creek north until you reach the split oak, you know, the one we picnicked under last month. There's a path there that leads to an old line shack. It's not much, but it's solid and hidden in the trees." "What about you?" Rebecca demanded, fear making her voice sharp. "I'll join you by nightfall," Gabriel promised. "But first, I need to make sure these men understand that their search ends here." Rebecca wanted to argue, to beg him not to confront Silas, but she knew it was pointless. Gabriel Ross protected what was his, and he had claimed her and Emily as his own from the moment he gathered them into his arms that stormy night. "Be careful," she whispered, rising on tiptoe to press a swift kiss to his lips. "Please, Gabriel. He's not worth your life." Gabriel's expression softened momentarily. "Don't worry. I have too much to live for to take foolish risks." He touched Emily's cheek gently, then stepped back. "Go now, while there's still time to reach the shack before they arrive." Rebecca nodded, swallowing her fear. With one last glance at Gabriel standing tall and resolute in the kitchen doorway, she hurried out the back of the house to where Daisy waited, already saddled and ready. With Mrs. Tildy's help, Rebecca mounted, settling Emily securely in a makeshift sling across her chest. The baby, sensing her mother's tension, remained unusually quiet, her big eyes solemn. "God go with you," Mrs. Tildy murmured, stepping back from the horse. Rebecca nodded, then urged Daisy forward, guiding the mare away from the ranch house and toward the creek that would lead them to safety. As they entered the shelter of the trees, she glanced back once to see Gabriel standing on the porch, watching them go, his rifle gleaming in the afternoon sun. The ride to the line shack seemed interminable. Rebecca followed Gabriel's directions precisely, finding the split oak and the nearly invisible path that wound through dense forest. Daisy picked her way carefully along the narrow trail, her ears flicking back occasionally to catch Rebecca's murmured encouragements. Emily, lulled by the rhythm of the horse's gait, had fallen asleep against Rebecca's chest. Her warm weight was both a comfort and a reminder of everything at stake. The line shack appeared suddenly a small, sturdy structure nestled among the pines, its weathered logs nearly indistinguishable from the surrounding forest. Rebecca dismounted carefully, mindful of her sleeping daughter, and led Daisy to a small lean to beside the cabin where the horse could be hidden from view. Inside, the shack was basic but well-maintained. A single room contained a narrow bed, a table with 2 chairs, a small cast-iron stove, and shelves stocked with essentials: flour, coffee, beans, and other staples. Firewood was stacked neatly beside the stove, and a water barrel stood in one corner, covered with a wooden lid. Rebecca settled Emily on the bed, surrounding her with pillows to prevent her from rolling off, then quickly set about lighting the stove to ward off the evening chill. As she worked, her mind raced with worry for Gabriel. What would happen when Silas arrived? Would there be violence? Gabriel was capable and had his men to back him, but Silas was cunning and ruthless. By the time the small cabin was warm and Rebecca had managed to prepare a simple meal from the provisions, twilight had deepened into night. Emily woke fussy and hungry, demanding Rebecca's attention. After feeding her daughter and changing her diaper, Rebecca paced the small room, listening intently for any sound that might herald Gabriel's arrival. None came. The hours crept by with excruciating slowness. Emily eventually fell asleep again, but Rebecca remained vigilant, starting at every creak of the cabin's timbers, every whisper of wind through the pine boughs outside. When the soft knock finally came, well past midnight, Rebecca nearly cried out with relief. She rushed to the door, throwing it open to find Gabriel standing there, his face grim in the moonlight. "Thank God," she breathed, pulling him inside and securing the door behind him. "I was so worried." Gabriel set his rifle aside and enfolded her in a fierce embrace. "Are you both all right?" "Yes, we're fine. Emily's asleep." Rebecca pulled back to study his face. "What happened? Did Silas come to the ranch?" Gabriel nodded, moving to the stove to warm his hands. "He and 5 hired guns. Demanded I turn you over." Fear clutched at Rebecca's heart. "What did you do?" Gabriel's expression was cold and hard in the dim light of the cabin. "I told him I'd never heard of Rebecca Hawthorne. That no woman and child matching your description had ever been to my ranch." "He didn't believe you," Rebecca guessed. "No. He called me a liar, threatened to search the place." Gabriel's jaw tightened at the memory. "I informed him that he was trespassing on private property and that if he or his men set 1 foot inside my house without permission, they'd leave in pine boxes." Rebecca sank into a chair, trembling at the thought of the confrontation. And then the sheriff arrived. A hint of satisfaction crept into Gabriel's voice. "I'd sent Peter to fetch him as soon as we knew Silas was coming. Sheriff Morris doesn't take kindly to armed men threatening his citizens." Relief washed over Rebecca. "So Silas left?" Not willingly, Gabriel replied. But the sheriff made it clear that he had no jurisdiction here to enforce any claim on you or Emily, even if you had been at my ranch, which I continued to deny. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Morris is no fool. He knew I was lying, but he backed me anyway. So it's over? Rebecca hardly dared to hope. Gabriel hesitated, then shook his head slowly. Silas left, but I don't think he's given up. The sheriff escorted him and his men to the county line, but there's nothing preventing them from doubling back. What do we do now? Rebecca asked, fear threading through her voice. Gabriel crossed the room to kneel before her, taking her hands in his. We get married. Tomorrow. Rebecca blinked in surprise. Tomorrow? But the wedding isn't for 2 weeks. I don't want to wait. Gabriel interrupted. Once you're my wife, I'll have legal standing to protect you and Emily that I don't have now. And if anything should happen to me, don't say that, Rebecca protested. If anything should happen, Gabriel continued firmly, you would inherit the ranch. Emily would be provided for. No one could take either of you away. Rebecca understood the practicality of his reasoning, but her heart rebelled at the thought of rushing their wedding because of Silas's threats. I wanted our wedding day to be perfect, she whispered, not overshadowed by fear. Gabriel's expression softened. He released her hands to cup her face gently. Rebecca, I would marry you in a blizzard in the middle of nowhere if that's what it took to make you my wife. The trappings don't matter. Only this you, me, our promise to each other. Tears filled Rebecca's eyes at the sincerity in his voice. Yes, she agreed softly. Tomorrow, then. Gabriel smiled, the tension visibly draining from his shoulders. He leaned forward to kiss her, a tender meeting of lips that spoke of relief and hope. We'll stay here tonight, he said when they parted. At first light, I'll take you and Emily back to the ranch. Mrs. Tildy has already sent word to the preacher. He'll be waiting. Rebecca nodded, too emotional to speak. The thought that tomorrow she would be Gabriel's wife, that Emily would have a father who loved her as his own, filled her with a joy that momentarily overshadowed her fear of Silas. They spent the night in the narrow bed, Emily nestled between them, Gabriel's arm protective across them both. Despite her exhaustion, Rebecca slept fitfully, waking at every sound, her body tense with watchfulness. Dawn broke clear and bright, the forest around the line shack alive with birdsong. Gabriel rose early, checking the surroundings before helping Rebecca prepare for the journey back to the ranch. Emily was cheerful after a good night's sleep, babbling happily as Rebecca secured her in the sling. The ride back was tense, Gabriel leading the way on his stallion, constantly scanning the trees for any sign of danger. Rebecca followed on Daisy, one hand holding the reins, the other resting protectively on Emily's back. They reached the ranch without incident, finding Mrs. Tildy and the hands ready for their arrival. The housekeeper had transformed the sitting room into a makeshift chapel, with wildflowers in mason jars and white ribbons draped over the fireplace mantel. The preacher will be here at noon, she informed them, shooing Gabriel away so she could help Rebecca prepare. Just enough time to get you looking like a proper bride. Despite the rushed circumstances, Rebecca found herself caught up in the simple joy of preparing for her wedding. Mrs. Tildy had laid out the dress. They had been working on a gown of pale blue silk with delicate embroidery at the neckline and cuffs. It's not quite finished, the housekeeper apologized as she helped Rebecca into it. But it will do. It's perfect, Rebecca assured her, smoothing the soft fabric over her hips. The color brought out the blue in her eyes, and the style, while modest, flattered her slender figure. Mrs. Tildy arranged Rebecca's hair in a simple but elegant style, weaving a crown of spring wildflowers through the honey-colored tresses. As a final touch, she handed Rebecca a small bouquet of the same blooms. There, the older woman said, stepping back to admire her handiwork. You look beautiful. Rebecca turned to the mirror and barely recognized the woman who gazed back at her. Gone was the desperate widow who had shivered on a barn floor months ago. In her place stood a bride radiant, hopeful, loved. Thank you, she whispered, embracing Mrs. Tildy. For everything. The housekeeper patted her back, blinking away tears. You've brought life back to this house, child, and happiness to that boy who's been like a son to me. That's worth more than thanks. A knock at the door announced the preacher's arrival. Mrs. Tildy hurried to greet him, leaving Rebecca alone for a moment with Emily, who was dressed in a new white gown that Mrs. Tildy had somehow found time to make. "Today we become a real family," Rebecca told her daughter, who gurgled happily in response, reaching for the flowers in her mother's hair. When Rebecca entered the sitting room on Elijah's arm, the ranch hand having volunteered to give her away, she found Gabriel waiting before the fireplace, his expression transforming from tense vigilance to awe as he beheld his bride. He had cleaned up well, wearing a new black suit and a crisp white shirt, his unruly hair tamed for the occasion. The ceremony was brief but meaningful, the preacher's words resonating in the sunlit room as Gabriel and Rebecca exchanged vows. When Gabriel slipped a simple gold band onto Rebecca's finger, another surprise, Mrs. Tildy had somehow managed. His hands were steady, his eyes never leaving hers. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the preacher declared. "What God has joined together, let no man put asunder." Gabriel's kiss was both tender and possessive, a promise and a claim that left Rebecca breathless. As they turned to face their small gathering of witnesses, now officially a family, Rebecca felt a profound sense of rightness settle over her. The celebration that followed was simple but joyful. Mrs. Tildy served a wedding feast that belied the short-notice roast beef, fresh bread, spring vegetables, and a cake that she must have stayed up all night to bake. The ranch hands toasted the newlyweds with good whiskey, and even the preacher joined in, declaring it the most romantic wedding he'd ever performed. Throughout the afternoon, Gabriel remained vigilant, his eyes frequently checking the windows and doors. But as evening approached with no sign of trouble, he gradually relaxed, allowing himself to enjoy the celebration of their union. After the preacher departed and Emily was put to bed, Gabriel and Rebecca found themselves alone for the first time as husband and wife. The ranch hands had tactfully removed to the bunkhouse, and Mrs. Tildy had retired early, claiming exhaustion from the day's excitement. "Mrs. Ross," Gabriel murmured, drawing Rebecca into his arms. "How do you like the sound of that?" Rebecca smiled up at him, her heart full. "Very much, Mr. Ross." He lowered his head to kiss her, this time without the constraint of witnesses, his passion evident in the way his arms tightened around her. Rebecca responded in kind, allowing herself to express the desire she had kept carefully contained during their courtship. When they finally parted, both breathless, Gabriel rested his forehead against hers. "I have one more surprise for you," he said. "Come with me." Taking her hand, he led her through the house to the back door and out into the yard. There, beside the kitchen garden, stood a small, newly constructed building that Rebecca had never seen before. "What is this?" she asked, puzzled. Gabriel opened the door and guided her inside. The space was simply furnished with a desk, bookshelves, a small blackboard, and several child-sized tables and chairs. "Your school," Gabriel explained, watching her face closely. "I started building it when you first mentioned wanting to teach. It's not finished yet, the bookshelves need filling, and there's more furniture to come from Denver. But it's a start." Rebecca turned to him, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness of the gift. "Gabriel, I don't know what to say." He smiled, the expression warming his eyes. "Say you'll teach our children here someday, alongside the neighbors' kids. Say you'll build something lasting, something that bears your mark on this land as surely as the ranch bears mine." "Yes," Rebecca whispered, tears of joy spilling onto her cheeks. "Yes, I will." Gabriel gathered her close, his kiss a seal on the promise of their future together. As they stood in the small schoolhouse, the first stars appearing in the deepening twilight outside, Rebecca knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, whether from Silas or the natural hardships of ranch life, they would face them together, stronger for having found each other. The next morning dawned clear and bright, a perfect spring day that seemed to reflect the joy in Rebecca's heart. She woke early, nestled in Gabriel's embrace, her body pleasantly sore from their wedding night. For a moment, she simply lay still, savoring the warmth of her husband's body and the security of his arms around her. The peaceful moment was shattered by the sound of hoofbeats in the yard, followed by urgent shouting. Gabriel was instantly alert, reaching for his pants before Rebecca had even fully registered the commotion. "Stay here," he ordered, pulling on his clothes with quick efficiency. He grabbed his rifle from where it leaned against the wall and was gone before Rebecca could protest. Heart pounding, she hastily dressed and rushed to Emily's room. The baby was awake but calm, playing with her toes and babbling to herself. Rebecca scooped her up and moved to the window, peering cautiously through the curtains. What she saw made her blood run cold. Silas Hawthorne sat astride a large black horse in the center of the yard, surrounded by his men. Gabriel stood on the porch, rifle in hand, with his ranch hands flanking him, all armed and grim-faced. Rebecca couldn't hear what was being said, but the tension was palpable even from a distance. Silas gesticulated angrily, pointing toward the house. Gabriel remained still, his posture unyielding. The standoff continued for what seemed an eternity. Then, to Rebecca's horror, Silas drew his pistol. Before he could aim it, multiple shots rang out not from Gabriel or his men, but from the edge of the property. Two of Silas's companions slumped in their saddles, while the others wheeled their mounts in confusion. A group of riders emerged from the tree line, at least a dozen men, led by Sheriff Morris. The lawman's voice carried clearly across the yard as he called out, "Drop your weapons. You're all under arrest." Chaos erupted. Silas's remaining men scattered, some firing wildly as they fled. The sheriff's posse returned fire with more precision. Through it all, Gabriel remained on the porch, rifle raised but not firing, protecting the house and those within. Rebecca clutched Emily to her chest, turning away from the window to shield the baby from the sight of violence, if not the sound. She sank to the floor, back against the wall, murmuring soothing nonsense to Emily, who had begun to cry at the noise. The gunfire ceased as suddenly as it had begun. Rebecca held her breath, straining to hear what was happening. Voices called back and forth, but she couldn't make out the words. Then, heavy footsteps on the stairs, approaching her door. "Rebecca?" Gabriel's voice, urgent but unharmed. "Rebecca, it's over." She scrambled to her feet and flung open the door to find her husband standing there, face grim but uninjured. With a sob of relief, she threw her free arm around him, Emily squashed between them. "What happened?" she demanded. "Is Silas dead?" Gabriel confirmed, his voice flat. "He wouldn't surrender. Try to shoot the sheriff." He pulled back slightly to look at her face. "Are you and Emily all right?" Rebecca nodded, still trembling with fear and relief. "How did the sheriff know to come?" "I sent word yesterday, after we spoke with him. Told him Silas might return, that I was concerned for our safety." Gabriel's expression softened as he gazed at his new family. Morris may be easygoing most of the time, but he doesn't tolerate threats to the people under his protection. He gathered a posse and patrolled the approaches to the ranch all night. "Thank God," Rebecca breathed, leaning into Gabriel's strength. He held her close for a moment, then gently disengaged. "I need to go back down. The sheriff will want statements from us both. Mrs. Tildy is preparing coffee and breakfast for everyone. When you're ready, come down and join us." Rebecca nodded, gathering her composure. "I'll be there soon." By the time Rebecca descended the stairs with Emily in her arms, the bodies had been removed from the yard, and an uneasy calm had settled over the ranch. Sheriff Morris sat at the kitchen table with Gabriel and two of his deputies, while Mrs. Tildy bustled about serving coffee and plates piled high with eggs, bacon, and biscuits. The sheriff rose when Rebecca entered, removing his hat respectfully. "Mrs. Ross, congratulations on your wedding, though I'm sorry it's been overshadowed by these events." "Thank you for coming when you did," Rebecca replied, taking the seat Gabriel pulled out for her. "And for believing us about Silas." Sheriff Morris nodded grimly. "Silas Hawthorne was known to us even before this. There have been complaints about his business practices, rumors of intimidation, but nothing we could prove until now." He accepted a fresh cup of coffee from Mrs. Tildy. "His men have either fled or been captured. Those we've caught will stand trial for attempted murder and various other charges." "And Silas?" Rebecca asked, needing confirmation of the threat's end. "Being prepared for burial in town." The sheriff replied matter-of-factly. "No one's claimed kinship. Was he your only family by marriage?" Rebecca nodded. "Thomas had no other siblings. His parents died years ago. Then I suppose his property will go to auction, unless you wish to make a claim as his brother's widow." The thought of returning to the farm, where she had been so unhappy, made Rebecca shudder. "No, I want nothing of his." Gabriel laid a supportive hand on her shoulder. "We have everything we need right here." Sheriff Morris smiled, the expression softening his weathered features. That you do? Well, I think we have all we need for now. I'll have my clerk draw up the official statements for you both to sign later this week. As the sheriff and his men prepared to leave, Gabriel walked with them to the porch. Rebecca watched through the window as he shook hands with each man, his gratitude evident in his bearing. When they had ridden away, he returned to the kitchen, his face reflecting both relief and lingering tension. "It's really over," Rebecca said, half statement, half question. Gabriel nodded, moving to stand behind her chair, his hands resting on her shoulders. "Yes, you and Emily are safe now. No one will threaten our family again." Family. The word resonated in Rebecca's heart, bringing unexpected tears to her eyes. She reached up to cover one of Gabriel's hands with her own. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." Mrs. Tildy, who had been quietly efficient throughout the tumultuous morning, chose that moment to announce, "Well, I believe a wedding breakfast is still in order, even if it's a day late. I've prepared something special." The housekeeper disappeared into the pantry, returning with a cake even more elaborate than the one she had produced for the wedding, this one decorated with sugar flowers and a delicate frosting that must have taken hours to create. "Mrs. Tildy," Rebecca exclaimed, "when did you find time to make this?" The older woman smiled smugly. "I have my ways. Now, let's celebrate properly. The ugliness is behind us. Today is for joy." As they gathered around the table, Rebecca, Gabriel, Emily, Mrs. Tildy, and the ranch hands who had been invited to join them, Rebecca felt a profound sense of peace settle over her. This was her family now. This was her home. Gabriel caught her eye across the table and smiled, the love in his gaze unmistakable. Rebecca smiled back, her heart full to bursting with gratitude and hope for the future they would build together. 5 years later, Rebecca stood on the porch of the expanded ranch house, watching as Gabriel led their son Robert on his first pony ride around the yard. Emily, now a spirited 5-year-old with her mother's honey-colored hair and her adoptive father's blue eyes, danced alongside, offering enthusiastic encouragement to her 3-year-old brother. "Not too fast, Gabriel," Rebecca called, one hand resting protectively on her swollen belly. Their third child was due in less than a month, and Gabriel teased that she grew more cautious with each pregnancy. "We're being careful, aren't we, partner?" Gabriel replied, winking at Robert, who giggled and nodded enthusiastically. The ranch had prospered under their joint stewardship. Gabriel's breeding program had produced a hardier strain of cattle that commanded premium prices, while Rebecca's school now served a dozen children from neighboring ranches, operating 3 days a week in the expanded building Gabriel had constructed for her. Mrs. Tildy, though slowing down, still ruled the kitchen with an iron hand, now assisted by a young woman from town who was learning the housekeeper's formidable skills. The elderly woman doted on Emily and Robert, spoiling them shamelessly while insisting she was merely ensuring they had proper manners. Life wasn't without its challenges. Drought had threatened the previous summer, and a harsh winter had claimed some of their stock. But together, they had weathered each storm, their partnership growing stronger through each trial. As Rebecca watched her family in the golden afternoon light, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From the desperate young widow shivering on a barn floor with her infant daughter, to the confident woman she was today, wife, mother, teacher, respected member of the community. The silver locket Gabriel had given her that first Christmas still hung around her neck. It now contained miniature portraits of both Emily and Robert, with space being kept for the new baby's likeness once he or she arrived. Gabriel completed the pony ride and lifted Robert from the saddle, setting the boy on his shoulders before approaching the porch. Emily skipped ahead, climbing the steps to hug her mother carefully around her belly. "Did you see, Mama? Robert didn't fall off once," she reported proudly. "I saw," Rebecca confirmed, smoothing her daughter's hair. "You were a very good helper." Gabriel climbed the steps, ducking slightly to avoid bumping Robert's head on the porch roof. His smile, still capable of making Rebecca's heart skip after 5 years of marriage, was warm with contentment. "How are you feeling?" he asked, his free hand coming to rest beside hers on her belly. "Wonderful," Rebecca replied honestly. And she was. The occasional discomforts of pregnancy were nothing compared to the joy of carrying Gabriel's child, of adding another member to their beloved family. As if in response to his father's voice, the baby kicked vigorously against their joined hands. Gabriel's smile broadened. Strong, like his mama. Or stubborn, like his papa, Rebecca countered with a grin. The dinner bell rang from inside the house, Mrs. Tildy's signal that the evening meal was ready. Robert squirmed to be let down, and Gabriel obliged, setting the boy on his feet. Emily took her brother's hand, leading him inside with the solemnity of an older sister fully aware of her responsibilities. Gabriel drew Rebecca into his arms as the children disappeared into the house. Happy, he murmured against her hair. Completely, she assured him, leaning into his strength. Are you? More than I ever thought possible. He pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. When I found you that night in the barn, I never imagined how you would change my life. Rebecca looked up at him, her heart full of love for this man who had saved her in every way a person could be saved. You changed mine too. You gave us a home, a family, a future. Gabriel's eyes grew serious. You had the courage to trust again, to build something new from the ashes of what you'd lost. That was all you, Rebecca. She shook her head slightly. It was us. Together. Gabriel smiled, acknowledging the truth of her words. He bent to kiss her properly, his lips gentle but insistent against hers. When they parted, the love in his eyes took Rebecca's breath away, just as it had that first Christmas Eve when he'd proposed. Together, he agreed softly. Always. Hand in hand. They entered their home, closing the door on the setting sun and moving toward the warmth, light, and love that waited within the life they had built together from that desperate night when she had shivered on a barn floor with her baby, until the cowboy tucked them both into his arms and into his heart forever.